I followed my neighbor Brian to the flower garden. It was very hot and I was wearing a short dress. I couldn't imagine if this story would end like this. Hello, darling. I'm glad you're here. Would you mind if I poured myself a bit of iced tea before I begin? It's just one of those stories where I need something cold in my hand, not to drink, necessarily, but to hold on to. You'll understand why soon enough. Anyway, you see, this all happened last summer, right in the middle of July, when the air was so thick with heat it felt like you could chew it. The kind of heat that makes you restless in your own skin. I remember because the cicadas were screaming in the trees, the kind of chorus that makes you feel like something's coming even if you don't know what. My name's Elaine, by the way. 62, retired, twice divorced, and currently married to no one, thank you very much. I live alone in a charming little house at the end of a cul-de-sac in Maple Ridge, the kind of town where the mail still comes before noon and everyone waves from their porch, whether they know you or not. And just across the picket fence lives Brian. I don't quite know how to begin with him. You'd think I'd know better by now. You'd think a woman like me would be immune to that kind of slow-burning interest, the kind that creeps in before you even realize you've let your guard down. But Brian has a way about him. The kind that unsettles something quiet in you. He moved in 2 years ago, shortly after his wife passed away. 58, tall, sun-browned from tending to his rose bushes every morning. I watched him through the kitchen window that first month, pretending to do the dishes while I took note of the way he stood, proud, but still with a sadness that clung to him like dew on early grass. We exchanged polite greetings at first. Morning, he'd say with that gravelly voice, like coffee and river stones. I'd reply with a nod, maybe a smile that lingered a beat too long. And over time, those small moments turned into longer conversations over the fence, shared gardening tips, the occasional slice of pie handed over in a Tupperware container. But it wasn't until that hot afternoon that everything changed. I had just stepped outside to water my geraniums, wearing a light cotton dress. Mind you, something easy and breezy, nothing scandalous. But the fabric clung to me in places I hadn't noticed in years, and my legs were bare, pale from staying out of the sun. I wasn't thinking about any of that, not then. I just needed air. The house was stifling. Brian was outside, of course. Always was, especially in the afternoons when the sun kissed the tops of the roses and made everything glow. He was kneeling in the soil, tending to those ridiculous purple climbers he's so proud of. I can never remember the name, and when he looked up, I felt it. That pause. That stillness. Like he saw me differently. Or maybe I just saw him seeing me. Hey, Elaine, he called, shading his eyes with his hand. Hey yourself, I replied, clutching my little watering can tighter than necessary. You doing okay in this heat? I laughed softly. Barely. I feel like I'm melting. He smiled, that quiet, one-corner smile that always made me feel like I was the only person in the world he was talking to. You want to see something? He asked, standing slowly, brushing the dirt from his knees. The garden's in full bloom out back. Thought I'd show you before the heat takes it all. I hesitated for half a second. Not because I didn't want to go, Lord knows I did, but because something about the way he said it made my breath catch. Like he wasn't just talking about flowers. Still, I nodded. Sure. I've got a few minutes. So I followed him, and that's when the trouble started. He led me through the side gate, the one covered in ivy and barely hanging on its hinges, into the back garden. I'd never been back there before. And honestly, I don't know why I hadn't. Maybe it was something unspoken between us, a quiet line neither had crossed, but now we had. And what I saw, well, I've lived a long time, and I've seen beautiful things, places, people, even moments, but that garden? It was something else entirely, rows upon rows of roses in every color imaginable, their petals heavy and bright, the smell of them wrapping around me like a warm shawl. There were foxgloves and marigolds, tall sunflowers leaning down like they wanted to whisper secrets. It was wild and tamed at the same time, like a man trying to keep his heart in order but failing gloriously. I didn't know it looked like this, I murmured. I don't show it to many people, he said, and then glanced sideways at me. Didn't have much reason to. Something about the way he said it made the hairs on my arms rise. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw a man trying not to want something. Or someone. We stood there for a minute, not saying much. The kind of silence that crackles. Do you always garden like this? I asked, trying to lighten the air. He gave me that smile again. Only when I want to impress a lady. My heart, that silly, foolish heart, skipped a beat. I laughed, softly, but I looked away. The truth was, I didn't know what I was doing there, not really. I didn't date neighbors. I didn't entertain flirtations with grieving men. I didn't wear dresses short enough to make me feel self-conscious, but then, I did. He reached out then, gently brushing something from my shoulder. A leaf, I think. Or maybe nothing at all. His fingers lingered longer than necessary, and I felt the warmth of him, close enough to notice the faint scent of cedar and earth. You've got a good soul, Elaine, he said suddenly. It caught me off guard. What makes you say that? He shrugged, eyes on mine. Just do. And just like that, I was back in high school, blushing like a fool because a handsome boy paid me a compliment. I told myself it was harmless, a little innocent flirting between two lonely people. Nothing more. But then his phone rang. He looked at it, his jaw tightening just slightly, before silencing the call and tucking the phone back in his pocket without a word. I tilted my head. Everything okay? Yeah. Just someone I used to know. Used to. That word. It never means what it sounds like. I let it slide, though something in me stirred, curiosity, maybe. Or warning. You keep secrets, Brian? He chuckled. Don't we all? I smiled, but my chest tightened. The sun dipped behind a cloud, and for a moment, the garden felt colder. Well, I said, stepping back, thank you for showing me. It really is beautiful. You are, too, he said softly, almost too quiet to hear. I froze. I could have ignored it. Should've. But instead, I met his gaze and let the silence say what I couldn't. And just then, just in that fragile, trembling moment, I heard the gate creak open behind us. So there we were, Brian and I, standing just a breath apart in the middle of that blooming, secret Eden, wrapped in summer heat and the kind of quiet tension you only feel when something is about to tip. And then the gate creaked open, and that moment, whatever it was, shattered. I turned toward the sound, instinctively smoothing the hem of my dress. Foolish, really, like a teenager caught where she shouldn't be. A woman stepped through the ivy-covered gate. Tall, elegant in that casually perfect way that only certain women seem to pull off. She had short, dark hair swept behind her ears, sunglasses perched on her head, and wore white linen like she was born in it. She didn't smile when she saw me. Brian, she said, her voice light but clipped. I let myself in. I hope that's still okay. I felt the warmth drain from my face. Brian straightened but didn't move toward her. Marcy, I thought you were still in Charleston. She shrugged, eyes flicking to me and back. I was. But you stopped answering my calls. And just like that, I knew this wasn't just someone he used to know. This was someone he hadn't let go of, or who hadn't let go of him. And I was standing in the middle of a garden I had no business being in, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt in that thin cotton dress and bare legs. I smiled, polite, distant, the way women do when they're trying not to show their bruises. I should go, I said, brushing imaginary dirt from my palm. No, Elaine, Brian said quickly, his voice tense. You don't have to. But I was already backing up. It's fine. I didn't realize I was interrupting. You're not, he said firmly, glancing at Marcy. She folded her arms, one brow arching. You two seem close. Brian said nothing, and in that silence, everything was said. I gave a little nod, more to myself than to them, and turned. I didn't look back as I walked out of the garden, head high, steps calm, but my heart was racing. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or curse or throw anything. I just stood in my kitchen, staring out the window at the garden next door, and whispered, of course. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the day over and over, the smile in his eyes, the brush of his fingers, that moment that almost became something. Was I reading too much into it? Had I created a fantasy out of loneliness? Had I wanted to feel wanted so badly that I imagined a connection where there was none? But no. I know what I saw in his eyes. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time, call my sister. Annie's 2 years older than me and lives out in Nevada with her third husband and a dozen rescue cats. She's blunt, practical, and allergic to self-pity. Well, he's a man, she said after I told her everything. And men are like pickup trucks. Useful when they work, but you never quite know what's rattling under the hood. I laughed, despite myself. That's comforting. You like him? I hesitated. I did. I do. But I'm not gonna fight another woman over a man I barely know. Annie clicked her tongue. Then don't. Let him come to you. And I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. The thing is, I wanted Brian to come to me. I wanted him to pick me, plain, older, ordinary Elaine, over his polished past. But wanting and expecting are two different animals. 3 days passed without a word. I stayed in, kept to my side of the fence, pruned my geraniums, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. Every now and then, I'd hear his voice through the open window, laughing with Marcy in that soft, careful way people laugh when they're trying to pretend they're not still hurt. Then, just as I started to convince myself that I was fine, that it was better this way, I saw him on my porch. It was early evening, the light low and golden, and he stood there like he didn't know whether to knock or turn around. I opened the door before he made up his mind. Brian. Elaine, he said, then looked down at the rose in his hand. Pink. Full bloom. May I come in? I stepped aside. Sure. He didn't sit, just stood near the kitchen table, holding the rose like it was something breakable. I owe you an apology. I crossed my arms. For what, exactly? He looked up, and his eyes, they weren't sad. They were ashamed for letting her walk into the garden. For not making it clear that you mattered. I stayed quiet. I wasn't about to let him off the hook that easy. She's not my girlfriend, Elaine. We had something, a long time ago, and when my wife died, well, I think Marcy saw it as her opening. I didn't. But I didn't stop her, either. And that's on me. He placed the rose on the table. But when I saw you walking away, I knew. I knew what I stood to lose. I stared at that rose for a long moment. You made me feel like a fool. I know. You let me stand there like I was some neighborhood flirt sneaking into your garden. He stepped closer. You were never a fool. And I wanted you there. More than I wanted her. My breath caught. He reached for my hand, not forcefully, just gently, like he was asking permission. I've been lonely a long time, Elaine. I forgot what it felt like to have something real to reach for. I could feel the warmth of his fingers, the calluses along his thumb, the sincerity in his voice. And yet, the bruise was still fresh. I'm not a second choice, I whispered. You never were. The clock ticked behind us. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. But here in my kitchen, time held its breath. I don't know if I can trust you, I said honestly. Then let me show you. There was a long silence. Then I asked the one question I didn't want to ask. Is she gone? He nodded. Left yesterday. For good. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw the man without the mystery, just a man, flawed, trying, afraid, and something inside me, something cautious and aching, began to soften. All right, I said quietly. But no more surprises, Brian. If there's something you need to tell me now. He hesitated. Just for a moment. There's one thing. I waited, heart suddenly tight again. She left something behind. A letter. For you. Brian stood there in my kitchen, framed by the pale morning light, holding a folded piece of ivory stationery. It was worn around the edges, like it had been handled too many times in too few days. My heart dropped to my stomach before I even took it. A letter, I said, not touching it yet. From her. He nodded once. She left it the morning she drove out. Said it was something you deserved to read. I hesitated. My fingers twitched to take it, and yet everything in me resisted. There was something sacred about the space between two women who've loved the same man. I wasn't sure I wanted to see how she'd chosen to cross it, but I reached for it anyway. Do you want me to stay? He asked, voice soft. I shook my head. No. This is something I need to read alone. He left without another word, just the faintest squeeze of my hand before stepping back onto the porch. I watched him go, his shoulders heavy, and waited until the sound of his footsteps faded. Then I sat down at the table and opened the letter. Elaine, you don't know me. At least, not the way I know you. I've watched you through that fence more times than I care to admit, not in a creepy way, but in that sad, slow way a woman does when she knows she's already lost. Brian was never mine, not really. We had something once, long ago, before his wife, before the grief, before he built walls around himself so high no one could reach him. I thought maybe if I waited long enough, stayed close enough, I could be the one to break through. And then there was you, with your morning coffee on the porch. You, laughing in the garden like you belonged there. You, wearing that little dress and walking after him like your heart already knew the way. I saw it. So did he. I hated you at first, Elaine. I won't lie. I hated the way you made him soften. The way he looked at you like you were spring after a very long winter. But the truth is, you brought him back to life. And I couldn't compete with that. I wasn't meant to. So I'm leaving. Not out of spite. Out of respect. You've earned him. Or maybe he's earned you. Either way, I hope you'll let him try. He needs someone who doesn't carry the weight of his past, someone brave enough to be seen, and soft enough to let him be seen, too. I hope that's you. It should be. Marcy. I folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. My breath came in shallow waves, a knot rising up in my throat. I didn't cry, not yet, but I felt something shift in my chest, like an old wound finally letting air. It wasn't the letter itself that undid me. It was the honesty in it. The way a woman can still be gracious even in the ache of losing. The way she saw me, all my quiet fears, all my questions, and answered them before I could even ask. That afternoon, I found Brian in his garden. He was on his knees, dirt on his hands, sleeves rolled up, the back of his neck damp with sweat. He looked up when I walked in, not surprised, but hopeful. His eyes searched mine. You read it? I nodded. She was honest. He sighed, brushing his hands on a towel. She always was. Even when it hurt. There was a pause. He didn't stand yet. He just looked up at me from where he was, like he was willing to wait for whatever came next. I stepped closer, standing between the roses and the foxglove, my feet sinking slightly into the soil. You really ready to let her go? I let her go a long time ago, he said. She just didn't know it. Maybe I didn't either. We were quiet for a moment. You scared me, Brian, I admitted. That day in the garden, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something dangerous. And I thought maybe I was just fooling myself, wanting something more at this age. You made me feel like I still mattered. You do, he said immediately. God, Elaine, you do. I crouched down beside him, resting my hand on his. I'm not looking to be saved. I've lived a whole life already. I've loved, I've lost, I've made peace with silence. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't want something. Maybe not fireworks. But a slow burn. Something that lasts. He smiled, that same crooked, quiet smile from before. Then let's start there. That night, we didn't do anything dramatic. No grand declarations, no sweeping gestures. We sat on my back porch with cold glasses of lemonade and a bowl of cherries between us, watching the sky turn violet. The cicadas started their song again, and I leaned my head on his shoulder, just for a moment. His hand found mine, fingers lacing without force, and it felt easy. Like maybe all the hard parts had led here, to this quiet, unexpected peace. The next few weeks passed gently. We fell into a rhythm, like two people who'd missed their cue in an old song but found it again just in time. Morning walks, long talks, laughter over forgotten recipes, shared glances over garden fences. But the past never stays quiet for long. One morning, as I was pulling weeds along the driveway, a silver sedan I didn't recognize pulled up to Brian's house. A young man stepped out, maybe in his early 30s, in a suit too crisp for our sleepy town. He knocked. Brian answered, and I knew immediately something was wrong. I don't know what made me walk over. Curiosity? Concern? Maybe that old fear again, that just when you let your heart settle, life finds a new way to shake it. The young man looked at me as I approached. You must be Elaine, he said. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt anything. Who are you? I asked gently. He looked at Brian. Then back to me. I'm his son. My heart stopped. I turned to Brian. His face was pale, his jaw tight. I didn't know you had children. I didn't either, he said quietly. The young man nodded. My mother was Linda. She passed last spring. She always said not to reach out, that it would complicate things. But when she died, I found the letters. The ones you sent her when she was pregnant. I had to know. I felt dizzy. I need to talk to him, the young man said, but kindly. Alone. I stepped back. Of course. That night, Brian came to me. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't smile. He just sat across from me and told me everything. It was true. He had loved Linda before his wife, before Marcy, before anything. He was young, reckless, afraid. She left town before he even knew she was pregnant. He tried to find her, but she disappeared. I never knew he existed, Brian said. And now I've missed 32 years of his life. I took his hand. So start now. It's not too late. But what if he hates me? Then let him. And love him anyway. And just like that, I realized life doesn't stop surprising you. Even when you think it should. Even when you think you've aged out of surprises. In the weeks that followed, I watched Brian grow not just as a man, but as a father. They met for coffee, took walks, talked about the years lost and the ones they still had left. I stayed close, but gave them space, and then, one evening, his son joined us on the porch. He sat between us, laughing about something Brian had done in the garden, his terrible pruning, I think. And for a moment, I saw the family he never knew he had. The family he still could, and me? I was part of it. Not as a replacement. Not as a rescuer. But as a witness to love that never quits, that just keeps finding new ways to show up. Yes, I followed my neighbor Brian to the flower garden. It was very hot and I was wearing a short dress. And no, I never could have imagined it would end like this, but I'm glad it did, because some gardens bloom late and some love stories do, too.